Hey guys, time for another story video. Quick. Gonna go right into the housekeeping because I got a lot to say about this. This chapter is one hell of a chapter. It truly was something. But anyway, quick housekeeping. This new schedule of giving myself an extra day to work on these has felt so much better. I'm not like rushing to do this at like 10:30 p.m. to upload at like 6 a.m. the following morning. So it's good. I like this. We're gonna keep this going. Friday's story should be going up on Sunday, and I'm looking forward to that so much for reasons that I will get into in a moment. Anyway, aside from that, I just want to let you guys know that since I'm coming up on 1,000 subscribers, and I'm not sure whether I was going to hit it or not by the time that Zendikar Rising came out, and it's not looking like I'm going to, but I'm going to do this anyway because I just wanted to. I'm doing a box opening for the Zendikar Rising set booster box. I've pre-ordered already at my local game store, and I'm really hoping they don't charge me $150+ for it. Really hoping. Because I like went out of my way to go to like a local gaming store that not a lot of people go to, just so I could probably be like the only person there that's getting a pre-order for a set booster box. So hopefully that's there. And I'm going to be opening up here on the channel literally as soon as I get it. But to go along with that and to just celebrate the outrageous boom that my channel has been having over the past couple weeks now, I'm going to be opening the box. I'm doing a giveaway on my Twitter, where I'll link down below, where I'm going to be giving away either your choice of the Expedition Land that I get with the box, or any 2 cards that I open during the booster box opening. So if you want to join, you just got to go on the link in my description, go to the tweet, like, retweet, and leave a comment explaining to me what card you want, and then you can join in. Not a lot of people are going into it, so your odds are pretty high of getting it at this point. The giveaway will end as soon as I get the box in my hands and open it up, which should be the 25th. Yeah, so that's when I'm closing out regardless. As to when I'm going to get the box and do the opening, that is up to however long it takes my LGS to get back to me. But anyway, aside from that, let's get down to the synopsis of this chapter, because it really was something. So we're back from the ending where we were before. We are now with the adventuring party into the Marasa Skyclave. And they get there. They do a big thing as to Nahiri saying that, oh, she needs this party to get through this. They get through the terrain, climb up higher, get over a couple of, like, traps. Zareth goes in front, scouts a couple traps, and they get to this opening maze-like structure. And once they get to this maze-like structure, Nahiri takes out the orb, MacGuffin, core thingy. She kind of holds it up, and it lights a path on the ground directly to the lithoform core. I think I'm pronouncing that right. They follow the path, they run into one small problem, they just brush it off with a little magic, they get to the core, Akiri, Zareth, and Nahiri are the ones that go into the building to get the core. Akiri goes to get it, Zareth tries to stop her, then Nahiri actually stops her, Nahiri gets the core, they take the core out, and then they go all Indiana Jones style, rushing out of there as the entire Skysclave is crumbling away. Now, it may sound like we just got a good chunk of the story way in. I've talked about a couple things happening, the entire climb, the entire journey, the little maze. Nope, we are talking about literally the first 2.5 pages. All of that happened. With like no detail, very little detail at all. But anyway, I'll get to that later. God, this chapter's a mess. Anyway, so they take the core, they Indiana Jones out of there. They run over and through some rocks. Kaza and Aura fall, but Kaza pulls out a magical flying broomstick that she just, staff, but broomstick really, that she used to save Aura, and then they fly away. This stick was never mentioned at all anywhere before this. You know she has it if you look at her card and the fact that she has flying, if I recall correctly, but in the story itself, never mentioned. Just comes out of nowhere. We'll get to that later. God, I cannot stress how much of a mess this chapter is. Anyway, so they get over that. Then you now have Nahiri, Akiri, and Zareth running away from this stuff. Out of nowhere, they jump off a little ledge to fall into a safer spot through something. A giant tornado appears. It attacks Nahiri. Nahiri tries to controls it a little bit. It fakes her out, pushes her off the ledge. Akiri then saves her. Nahiri, of course, being really petty, is mad that she needed saving and not happy that somebody just saved her life. Then lava comes out of nowhere because of the royal. The royal's here, by the way. Makes a giant lava elemental that fights Nahiri. Nahiri tries to fight the elemental. In doing this, Akiri and Zareth are kind of just staring in awe because the elemental just like threw them away. Zareth runs at Nahiri, who is about to use the life form core to stop the elemental, and Nahiri uses it, kills the elemental, everything within a certain amount of radius, and makes Zareth turn to stone, and kills him. Akiri then is angry about this, is very emotional, because apparently they're lovers now. Again, I'll get to that later, but I don't like that. Akiri then takes the orb away somehow. She thinks she picks it up off the ground. She steps away and tries to throw it over the air so that it just falls so Nahiri can never use it again. As she's about to do this, she's paralyzed by a Hedron behind her in the distance. Nahiri goes up to her, takes the orb, and pushes her off the cliff. And then the chapter ends with her supposedly dying. Yeah. If it sounds like that was a lot to push into this chapter, it is. If you're wondering if any of that was in real emotional depth or detail, it wasn't. Zareth's death had to be the most emotional part of this entire story, and it was about 3.5 paragraphs. But yeah, I got a lot to say about this. So let's get down to the actual review. Okay, so let's get the elephant out of the room here, because I feel like I think you guys have realized this, and I feel like enough people have kind of realized this after reading this chapter. What purpose does the adventuring party serve here? Narratively speaking, I mean. Actually, both narratively speaking and in the story. What purpose do they bring to the story? Because if you look and read the introductory of this chapter, they climbed into Nahiri could almost touch the intricate carving on the lowest reaches of the Skyclave. It was only then that Nahiri needed her companions. Zareth's sharp eyes, Aura's quiet steadfastness, Kaza's quick thinking, and Akiri's masterful line-singing skills. Because around them, the Skyclave floated in pieces and chunks. Now, apologies for my horrible lisp aside, right after this, they get to a scene where they're climbing up the side of the Skyclave to get to the top, right? Now, normally, you would expect a scene like this to include problems. Either you say that they just get to the top with no problem and skip it over if you really need to just get the pace going, or you introduce problems that then prove the fact that this party is needed as a whole. For example, somebody could fall and then Akira could catch them, which does happen. But somebody could fall and then Kaza could pick them up on her staff. That never happens. Aura can do magic. I assume that he could do some level of thing. He could make them less tired. He could just do anything. Kaza and Aura could do anything to be useful, really. And this next scene just doesn't show any of that. As they're climbing up, it reads, eventually, not even Nahiri could tell which stones would hold them and which were like temperamental allies, looking solid and trustworthy until you put some pressure on them. That's foreshadowing for later, but anyway. More than once, somebody in the party lost their footing and Akiri would snag them with her ropes or Nahiri with her lysomancy. They all fell. Everybody fell. The only people that saved each other were Akiri and Nahiri. As we're about to see, you don't actually need Aura or Kaza in the story at all. They don't do anything, and I'm going to get to that later on. So, they move on, and you get to the part where they're going through traps. And here you actually get Zareth's purpose. Where they go, they followed the lit stone path in silence, their instincts telling them that they were being led by an ancient and powerful magic. Zareth, being the quickest and quietest of the party, often scouted ahead. He found traps full of poison and archways waiting to collapse, and guided them around such threats safely. These were only a fraction of the dangers in the time-worn Skyclave. That right there is, I believe, my most hated part of this entire chapter, is that paragraph and that following sentence. Because Zareth is useful for one thing in this entire story, and it is disarming traps, because of course he's the rogue, right? That's all he does. Later on in the story, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't actually do anything. He shoots a trident that he pulled out of nowhere. But as a member of the party, the adventure party, he doesn't do anything. At all. He disarms these traps, but we don't even get to see him do that. We're told that he does it. They don't say how he sneaked up on something. They don't say how he managed to see traps or see these poison things or inspect the weakness of the Skyclave. No. We're just told that. And then we are directly told that these were only a small bit of the dangers that they will find in the Skyclave. Other than it coming down because Nahiri took the core, there's nothing. Nothing else happens after this. At all. It states that they were almost attacked by these unseen critters, but Nahiri kind of just made a stone glow and then they left. And that's it. There was no reason to include that sentence. There was no reason to include Kaza and Aura in this chapter at all. There is actually one reason they could be included, and I'll get to that in a little bit. because I also hate that reasoning. Later on, as the place is crumpling around them, Nahiri gets the thought of planeswalking away. And she says, no, I'm not going to leave Zendikar like that. Well, that feels nice the first time you read it, and it kind of confused me the first time I read it, and I went back and reread that page again just to make sure I kind of understood what she meant. And it made no sense at all. Because, let's assume that Nahiri didn't need this adventuring party with her, that she could have actually pulled it off on her own. If she took the core by herself and planeswalked away, she wouldn't be leaving Zendikar. She'd be saving her own life, and could just planeswalk back to Zendikar whenever she healed. There is no rush to do this, really. Like, yes, she wants to get this core as soon as possible, but it's not like the royal is like actively getting worse. It's just a continuous problem. There is no real incentive for Nahiri to rush. If Nahiri really wanted to, she could have taken her time with this, which again goes against her character, so I understand that. But her planeswalking away wouldn't be her abandoning Zendikar, because she could just planeswalk back whenever the plot-driven cooldown time would happen. We've already had Jace planeswalk out of somewhere and then planeswalk back. But you can say he's a blue mage, but whatever. But then you have Samut, the planeswalker from Amonkhet, and she just dipped in and out of Kaladesh in an instant. I think it was Kaladesh, I'm not sure. Pretty sure it was Kaladesh. No, that was Huatli. Samut went somewhere else. But anyway, they just got looped right back. So, if the cooldown of a planeswalker is up to interpretation, or at least up to the editor in charge, I understand that, but Nahiri's in no rush. She could have just planeswalked away. So, scenario number 1. Nahiri is alone. Cool, she didn't need the party to begin with. She could have planeswalked away the second danger hit. Still had the core with her, because she can take the core when she planeswalks. Scenario number 2, where we are from now. She needs the party for whatever reason, and doesn't want to abandon them. Well, look at this. She does not give a shit about their life. She really doesn't. Because she kills one of them with no hesitation later on, and then she kills the other one with no hesitation later on. And Aura and Kaza are safe right now. They can literally fly. They can fly. The only danger they are facing right now is falling, and they can fly. Well, Kaza can fly, and she can take Aura with her. Right now, Akiri has no reason to be worried about them, because she can probably trust that Zareth and Akiri will be fine, and they are. Nahiri could have planeswalked away, waited a little bit, planeswalked back, and continued doing what she was doing. She could have just told the adventuring party that she needed to planeswalk away out of instinct, or that's assuming she even cared about them to begin with. There's no reason that she needed to say that. There's no reason that she couldn't planeswalk away, and the author having brought it up doesn't excuse it. Like, you bring it up, and then you wave it away, but the reason that you waved it away doesn't make sense with the actual narrative and cohesive structure of the lore. It doesn't make any sense. Moving on from this, Aura and Kaza do nothing. They don't do anything. They really don't. Halfway to the story, I think it's like halfway, or like a third of the way through the story, at that point, each of them have gotten like 1 or 3 words. I'm pretty sure Aura only gets a gasp, and that's it. He gets a gasp, and then he like looks, and no, actually no, I'm looking at it now. He doesn't get any lines. He gasps when Nahiri opens the pathway, and then he just looks at Kaza. Kaza then only gets, I believe, 3 lines, and one of them is only a word long. They don't do anything. Then they're pushed aside to the door. They stay in the door while they take the core away. After they take the core away, they fall, and then they're gone for the rest of the chapter. What do they do? Why do they need to be here? They didn't need to be here at all. Nahiri didn't know that the core was going to have the entire skyscape fall down, so she couldn't really plan for that. She could have assumed that it was a death trap and that something would happen, and maybe that's why she brought Kaza. But it doesn't make any sense. At least give them something to do. Like, at a narrative point, give them something to do. She could have fit in that, like, Kaza blew away some monster, or that Aura healed them after one of them fell. All it would have taken would be, like, 2 or 3 sentences on each of them, like, an obstacle for them to overcome. And if you're saying, oh, well, that's lazy, that's not exciting, that doesn't give you enough detail to actually appreciate their skills, well, yeah, that's true. But that's what Zareth got. He got a paragraph that was, like, barely 3 sentences long. That's all he got. That's all he did. And it's infuriating, because these characters are brought in without any purpose. They're brought in solely to fit in the narrative of the party, of the 4-person party that comes with Zendikar. And I get that. I get what she was trying to do. but it doesn't really work here when you don't actually give them something to do in the storyline. And if it sounds like I'm dragging out on this, it's because it legitimately irks me on a fundamental level. Like, I have read countless pieces of literature, from little short snippets of poetry to sonnets to little idyls, short stories, novels, novelettes, and book series. I've read a bunch of stuff, and I've experienced literature for most of my life, and it's what I do as a passion in school. Well, what I did in school as a passion. And these are just narrative mistakes that you either don't expect a seasoned writer to do, or that you just don't expect a writer in general to do. Introducing characters solely for them to not do anything doesn't make any sense. And I know what you're going to say. There is a chance that Kaza and Aura made it down safely, and that one of them, Kaza caught Akiri as she was falling down, and Akiri, Kaza, and Aura are going to go fight Nahiri. Yes, that is something that could have happened, and therefore that would justify their existence in the story. No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't at all. It would not excuse it, because what you have now done is that you have made Kaza and Aura plot devices without any personality. If any of you have ever seen Stranger Things, you remember Will? Will isn't a character in any of the seasons. Will is just a functional plot device. In season 1, he's not even in it. In season 2, he's literally just a monster detector. In season 3, he doesn't do anything. He's just there because the narrative needs him to be there. No other reason than that. And it's the same here. If they come back and save Akiri from her fall, I will legitimately hate this story, because it's just reinforcing the fact that they're useless, and they were just introduced to do something later on in the story. They're not actual characters. They're not. Like, can you tell me anything about Kaza and Aura that wasn't directly stated by the author? No, because they don't have personality. At least Akiri and Zareth got the side story to work on it, and they got some stuff that they've done in the first 2 chapters. They got scenes by themselves. Kaza and Aura didn't do that. Aura has barely spoken at all. I've dragged on this enough, but just to wrap up the whole narrative structure and how the party's really useless. No one does anything in the story. The core does 90% of the work, which I get it. That's the point. It's the key, but the key was just meant to power whatever they were finding, or to open the door of whatever they're finding. I don't think it was meant to just solely, literally hold their hand the entire way there, most of the way there. Yeah, the climb was hard, but it took 2 or 3 paragraphs to do? After that, just the core did the rest of the work. Even when Nahiri was scaring stuff away, I'm pretty sure it was just the core glowing. Now, you're probably going to bring up how Nahiri herself states that it's like the core wanted to be found, and that's why it's making their journey easier. And yes, that is true, but it doesn't make the story any less boring, nor the narrative any less dry. It doesn't work. But anyway, moving on from that, we're going to move into a little more inconsistencies, which is just things happening out of nowhere, with no predetermination. Like, the staff that Kaza just pulls out. We know that she has a staff because we've seen her artwork and we know she has flying. But if you're just reading this as a piece of literature or as a basic short story with a beginning, middle, and end encompassing in 4 parts, Kaza didn't get any introduction for that wand thing at all. Never mentioned it, never mentioned that she's carrying it. It's a pretty big thing that you can't really hide. And they could have just said it, that she had it at any point, unless I'm really misremembering. Even in the scene in the last chapter, she doesn't have it. Then you get to Zareth's trident, which apparently Zareth, the rogue, has a trident that shoots out energy, which, again, really cool. Actually really cool. I would have loved to see it as an equipment on a card, but it's never actually introduced anywhere. It's shown for 2 scenes? And it's a trident. It's not like it's a sword or a knife. A trident is 3 feet long? 4 feet long? If you really want to get into the fantasy aspect of it. Where was that this whole time? How was he sneaking around with a trident on him? It doesn't make any sense. And if you wanted him to have a trident, you're writing all these parts. Have him have the trident in the beginning scene when they're introducing all the characters. Have them say that he has the trident when they're walking and they get attacked by that monster creature that he returns to goop. You need to introduce these things, or else it just feels like it's out of nowhere. The lava elemental, no, that's not out of nowhere. We've seen the royal create lava. We've seen the royal change the landscape. They even say it themselves in the storyline. That's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. But I really didn't like the way that flying broomstick, because if we knew that Kaza had a flying broomstick, there would be no tension in the falling during the climb. Because you would know that if Kaza fell, she would either get caught by one of the other 2, or she would be flying. She would just be fine. Because, as we can see, she fell during an extremely stressful and chaotic part of the story, and she was fine. She even had enough time to pick up Aura. So, introducing that at the beginning would have just cut the tension out. In that case, why even have it? If it's going to cut the tension when you introduce it in the beginning of the story, and then if you don't introduce it in the beginning of the story and you introduce it later and it feels like an asshole, what was the purpose of her having that broomstick? Or magical staff, I mean. There isn't one. Anyway, I gotta move on because I'm like hitting 20 minutes now. But as we said before, I hated how they didn't show how Zareth actually disarmed the traps. That's a running thing from here on. For example, in the beginning where she states, the higher they climbed, the more treacherous the landscape became. And then following that is a pretty descriptive chapter of how, not chapter, a very descriptive paragraph as to how the scenery and their aspect changes as they're climbing up. Cool. Take the first sentence out. Paragraph would have been so much better if it didn't have that opening sentence in there. Moving on from here, later on it says, this is it, Nahiri breathed. This will change Zendikar forever, referring to the core. Besides her, Akiri felt Zareth flinch. All his worries and his fears about the core conveyed in one involuntary motion. Why did you need that sentence there? Just say that Zareth flinched. Your readers can probably tell why he's flinching if you spend the very next paragraph explaining how much concern he had. You didn't need that sentence. You're just treating your readers like a child at that point. And then one more part that I just want to cover before I move on to like the final two things. Later on, when Nahiri is trying to save herself and she sees that Zareth is helping her, she goes, Nahiri considered refusing. This trickster, who has no love for her, might let her fall. But despite his tricks, she knew Zareth had enough honor not to murder her in cold blood. That is not true. Maybe Zareth is the kind of guy that wouldn't murder in cold blood like that or wouldn't let people die like that, but if you read the side story, yes, he does. He will hate himself for it, but he'll do it if he feels he has to. And right now, Zareth very much feels that he has to stop Nahiri. Like, he very much distrusts her. It wouldn't put him past him. If he had actually let Nahiri die like that, or tried to kill her, which he kind of does later on, it wouldn't surprise me. I'd actually be glad that he's sticking with his guns and his principles. But Nahiri, on the other hand, has no idea. I'm pretty sure Nahiri just met these people. She did just meet these people. She has spent, what, a day or two with Zareth? And the entire way through, Zareth has been mistrusting her, misjudging her, criticizing her, questioning her, and Nahiri doesn't like him at all. Nahiri saved his life just to a point. There is no reason that Nahiri should actually trust Zareth right now. The only reason she does is because the writing tells you she does. And then when she grabs him, she says, Nahiri grabbed the rope beside Zareth, and as she prepared to swing, she whispered in his ear, I know you want the core for yourself. Surprise crows on Merfolk's face, but before he could respond, Nahiri commanded the stone underneath them to give them a push. As far as I'm aware, we don't actually come back to that. This doesn't become a plot point at any point in time. You could say that it kind of hints at the murder that Zareth kind of plots at throwing the trident at Nahiri, but like, I'm pretty sure he was going to do that anyway, with or without Nahiri saying this. This sentence doesn't really do anything narratively. It looks kind of cool, it sounds cool, but looking at this and analyzing the story on like a literary level, it doesn't work. That little sentence that she says, it doesn't actually work for what I believe the author is intending it to sound like, which is it just sounds cool, and that's it. There is no substance to those words. And finally, we get to what I think is the one thing that, above everything, legitimately had me stop reading. Well, I was reading this at night with some tea, listening to some music, kind of getting through the story and ingesting it all, and I repeatedly had to stop because I kept asking myself questions regarding this following thing. And that is the fact that Nahiri contradicts herself in this story. It's like when another author comes into pre-existing universe, it's a chance that they won't actually properly portray the character because they might be new at it, they might not be knowledgeable of the existing lore, the existing history of the character. This happens in comic books a lot, where an author, for whatever reason, might just really mischaracterize a character. And at some level, it's understandable. You're not going to know everything about a character. Sure, it's expected that if you're going to write a pre-existing character, you're going to do your homework, you're going to study them. But I'm not talking about that. I know A.T. Greenwald hasn't written for Magic before, so I could excuse her on that front. But Nahiri, throughout this entire chapter, directly contradicts the things she says she believes and the things she's done in this very own story. For example, in chapter 1, when she's going through that skyclave with Nissa. First of all, she mocks the fact that Nissa is talking to an elemental to find the way through, but Nahiri does the same thing with stones. But okay, you can excuse that, just a differencing of opinions where Nahiri puts her principles into stone. But it made a big point in the first chapter that Nahiri felt confident in knowing she was going in the right direction as she faced obstacles in her way, such as the door the centipede trap, the Feldegar, those are things that Nahiri felt reinforced her idea that she was heading in the right direction. In this storyline, she doesn't face any problems. Every single problem she goes across is solved for her by the core, or it's just not there to begin with. And she's cool with it. And she takes this as reaffirming her beliefs that this is where she needs to go because the core is calling to her. The core wants to be found by her. And it doesn't make any sense. Nahiri as a character has not changed from the adventure with Nissa. The only thing that has been stated to change, and the only thing that has changed, is that she feels the need for other people to help her. That has remained constant because that is a shift that happened because of chapter 1. The fact she didn't need this adventure party, that's different. Nahiri could have just needed somebody else, anybody else there to help her there. I wasn't saying earlier that Nahiri doesn't need help, I was saying that she didn't need this party's help. She literally just needed Zareth and Akiri, and really she only needed Akiri throughout all this. But anyway, God, the story's a mess, and I was so fed up reading this, because after she takes the core, it is repeatedly stated, even in italics to reaffirm the fact this is happening, that the core is trying to speak to Nahiri. It is actively trying to communicate with Nahiri, and Nahiri's ignoring it to run away and to do the things she wants to do. Which, yes, is in tune with Nahiri's character. She's steadfast, she's resilient, she wants to do the things she wants to do. It's sort of the Boros nature in her that she wants to do her thing and she wants to do it now. But her entire character in the first chapter and the second chapter revolves around learning, understanding, and communicating with the rocks. Communicating with these artifacts that her people have left behind. And what does she do in the entire second half of the story? She just completely ignores it the entire way through. She ignores it till the very end. She never actually tries to listen to what the core's telling her, even though her entire thing is listening to rocks. It doesn't make any sense, even under the parameters of this story in these 3 chapters. All in all, I hated this chapter. I think it's the worst chapter of the 3. And it's not even because... No, actually it is. It's just a really bad chapter. The pacing is terrible. It speeds through the first act in like a page and a half. Then it drags on the running for 2.5 pages. And then the ending is just really weird speed-wise. In regards to characterization, it makes its Nahiri contradict what the Nahiri 2 chapters ago was doing. Even the chapter before was doing. Characterizing Aura and Kaza was a failure because they're not characters, they're just plot devices. Characterizing Akiri and Zareth, it works. I'll give them that. It works. I will actually believe that they're dating. It's a little forced, but I believe that they're romantically with each other through their actions, through their words, through their physical contact, and their nonverbal communication. I get that. I'm actually okay that they're dating, really. I just don't like the fact that they're not dating in the side story, and that the side story really takes place a little bit before this. I don't like that. I don't like the miscommunication and the way the side story and the main story don't agree on that. I think the characterization wasn't correctly pointed at the authors when this was being set up, but anyway, that's a more of a meta-level Wizards of the Coast managing kind of thing. It's not up to the individual authors. They both portray the relationship very differently, but very well. I'll give them that. Aura and Kaza, though, no characters. There are no other characters in the chapter. Nissa and Jace aren't even here to give any sort of interesting variance to this chapter. The overall motivation of the characters, it's fine. It's like bare bones it is. The action scenes don't really feel all that exciting. The only thing that actually made me feel any sort of emotion was Zareth dying, but it's like, okay. It happened, it hurts Akiri, but at that point it's like, I know Akiri's gonna die. And if she doesn't die, it's gonna be because Kaza and Aura, which I just called them Korra in the entire take that I just cut out. But anyway, if they come back, they're just gonna come back as plot device to save Akiri's life, and that's not interesting. At that point, it's not. I can see it coming. And if it doesn't happen and they're actually all dead, then their characters are all a waste of time anyway. Yeah, I think I'm gonna cut it there. I'm going way too long in this video, but it's just because I have a lot to say. And I'm sorry that most of it is negative, but it's just, I didn't like this at all. Like, at least the last chapter was kind of but it had some enjoyable moments, specifically with Jace and the innkeeper. With this, it just, the story itself is fine. It does what it needs to do. It sets off the plot points that it needs to set off. It ticks all the boxes that it's supposed to tick off. It just fundamentally, on a literary level, doesn't work with me. I don't like the characterization. I don't like the pacing. I don't like the way it's written. I don't like the action scenes. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it at all. As to how the final chapter is going to go, I hope it's better, and that's really all I can say about that. I'm sorry about the length of this video. If you stuck all the way through, congratulations! Thank you. But anyway, we'll see how the bonus chapter does on Friday. I hope it's a lot better than this, and I hope that Miguel Lopez is still writing those. Bye.